Anyone who's lost a child says that it's the worst pain of all. It's not the planned order of things. Parents are supposed to die before their children. Now, we have had 61 mass murders in the United States in the last 30 years with firearms. Now, to think that we just had 26 innocent people killed that included 20 children to a mass murder is just horrific. I mean, it's hard to comprehend. The Newtown, Connecticut massacre has shaken America, and we have to find a way to prevent incomprehensible, horrendous acts like this from happening again. So what's the answer? I mean, where do we start? Is it gun control?
It's a good question, Vicki, because, you know, the Second Amendment we have gives us the right to bear arms. And I don't take that lightly. Because if we don't bear arms, we can't protect ourselves. And we say, well, what have we got to protect ourselves about in this country? We have a lot to protect ourselves about. Look back at what's happened in history over and over as gun control has taken place and people have been massacred. You have to have that right. But where do you draw the line is the question. Are you going to draw it with a tank or with a
grenade?
Yeah, that or some kind of missile? Is it an AK-47? Is it a shotgun? And there are different standards. And I don't know the answer to that. But
well, I can't see any purpose for anybody to have an automatic weapon.
Not in a civilized country where there are no political issues. But if you have the oppression like happened in Nazi Germany to millions of Jews, I mean, they were wishing they had AK-47s.
To protect themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So is the problem guns? It's the people who use the guns. But then if they're available, it's obvious that if they're available to people who are not responsible or who are dangerous people, that's a big deal.
And then a lot of people say, well, if the teachers had had guns when this happened, that they might have been able to stop this deranged boy.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe they could have. So gun control is a sensible thing to a point. But we also have the Second Amendment to pay attention to, and that's important.
So where does this all start? I mean, let's talk a little bit about mental illness, because that's what's really causing people to do things like this. I mean, normal people just don't go out and start shooting people, particularly little kids that have not done anything.
Right.
You hear stories like this sometimes, you know, when somebody's maybe gone through a tough divorce or somebody that's been fired from a job. You see this in the headlines once in a while. In fact, I had a housekeeper one time who her son-in-law killed her daughter and her 4 grandchildren.
Oh my gosh.
And then killed himself.
Well, see, sometimes you can't predict things like that, but when you look at these people, they really have a kind of a pattern to their behavior. A lot of them have been bullied. They had dysfunctional families. They felt ostracized by a community. They carry a lot of guilt and about feeling terrible about who they are. And they have a violent streak that's in them that sometimes you can't predict. But I think you could predict it if you had an educational system that was different.
Well, sometimes people have brain dysfunction or they have brain injury. You know, I was reading a story about a family where the kids would fight when the parents were in the other room or when the parents weren't even home. And this boy got hit in the head and the kids were afraid to tell. And then he ended up having this brain dysfunction and nobody could figure out what it was for a long time, and it was from head trauma.
There's so much in the way of mental illness going on, and there's no one to take care of them for the most part. The legal system says that basically if you haven't broken the law in some way, there's nothing the law can do about it. And it's just protecting your individual rights. But at the same time, what about all those people that are murdered because these people go off the deep end?
Well, the other thing, too, is that sometimes somebody that is planning to do something like this, they tell somebody.
Right.
And many times the person they tell is afraid to tattle, so to speak. You know, they don't want to tell.
They don't want to get involved.
Yeah.
And then something disastrous happens.
But see, that what they need to realize is that if they do tell, they're a hero.
Oh, for sure. But again, that's not really the solution. And part of it is that we have a mental health system that works, which doesn't. What we have now is jails that are acting as asylums. And until someone breaks the law, where it could be a huge disaster, no one's going to be able to do anything about it. But if we had an educational system that was different, and it wasn't just about STAR testing, and it wasn't just about trying to make sure that we have students that are smart and able to be rocket scientists and doctors and whatever else you regard as highly educated people. I mean, that's important, but it's not the whole story. In fact, it's the least important when you look at the purpose of education being that we really become whole people who are balanced and have an appreciation of what life's about and learn to build community and to support one another and live by the golden rule.
Well, this should start in school. This should be part of our education.
It should be mandatory.
Education isn't just about academics. It includes other things in life to prepare you for life.
Right.
And reading, writing, arithmetic, that's nice to know and it's nice to have as a background.
Sure.
But you need to have these other life skills.
Well, some schools have them.
And how to deal with stress. And what happens if you're bullied? What happens with all these...
Well, see, some schools have a class that's like social transformation class, where you go and you talk about the issues that you're having in life, and a teacher who's like a psychologist or is a psychologist counsels them together so that they have like a group therapy session. I mean, it's a great way to go from kindergarten right through every level of school, because unless we're balanced in our lives in a way where we know who we are and we feel comfortable about who we are, or if we're deranged, we find out because we either help those people or take them off the streets.
Well, also, we need to know how to handle our stress. We need to know not to stuff it and end up being a human volcano.
Well, that's right.
To learn how to assert ourselves properly. But there is a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder that's going on, and it's not just from people that have been in Afghanistan.
No, I mean, the post-traumatic stress occurs in just about every family, because we all have some amount of dysfunctionality. But it's not every kid that's going to go off the deep end. I mean, a lot of these kids come from families where there are a lot of kids, and they're all fine except for the one. And so I think we just need a better way to identify who these people are, and it should be something that is widespread throughout the whole educational system. And once we know who they are, then we can take steps to counsel them or to remove them from society, because we can't have them in a place where they can do things like mass murders.
I was reading a story. This poor woman wrote this story about her son, and he was very young, and he would just be like this really, really nice kid, and then sometimes he would just go ballistic and crazy and dangerous and
threaten to kill her.
So she said that the answer was to report it so that there would be a paper trail. Otherwise, the authorities wouldn't pay attention.
Yeah, well, apparently in this particular case they did, because they came by and investigated the situation, and indeed this person had guns and had a plan in mind and admitted it. It's strange how they talk about things like that. So we're talking about mass murders. We're not talking about just trying to use gun control. Yes, there needs to be some kind of control there, and we need to work on where we draw the line. But our Second Amendment right is a very important one, and to bear arms to protect ourselves is no small matter when history speaks the way it does and says that if you don't have arms, you're in a position where you're liable to be mass murdered yourself.